Yeah, it'd be really good to come maybe all the way back to your awakening to this topic and how this kind of became something that you cared about.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I've been fussing around with bikes all my life, but in the kind of last 10 years, it sort of took over a bit. So I'm, yeah, mid 40s. I've done lots of stuff. I've worked in lots of things. My background's actually graphic design, visual communication stuff. And but I can trace it all back to my red tricycle I had at age 4. I think I've been fiddling with bikes ever since then. And I always remember thinking as a kid, like I was quite a young child, thinking I didn't want to drive a car. I wanted to ride a bike. I loved riding my bike. I was really lucky. I grew up in rural Sussex in the 80s and 90s, and you could still ride bikes around. I used to do that with my mates. We used to ride for miles and miles and miles, and it was just about okay to do that. We dodged the big roads, and that was all right. But obviously, you come to like 16, 17 and living in a rural area, and it was like, it just wasn't feasible to just ride my bike. It wasn't an option. So I learned to drive immediately and started driving my bike places. And it kind of, that carried on, and I sort of rode bikes all through my education and early years of working in London. And I just kind of realized that cars are getting more prevalent into my life, and everywhere I went, everything I did was always affected by vehicles in some way. And I'd see this where I grew up. So I go back there now. My sister lives where I grew up. She's got 4 kids. They can't ride a bike anywhere essentially but the end of the driveway. Like, there's no way that you could ride. I go and visit them there, and I ride the routes I used to ride when I was but a wee boy, and it's terrifying. It's horrible. And this sort of stuff, that sort of personal, like, feeling of, like, restriction that motor vehicles have placed on my life by stopping me riding bikes in places, I suppose, is the impetus for it all. And I got into bike campaigning sort of stuff, I suppose, living in London 15 years ago. I did volunteered for Sustrans. I did stuff around that, mainly communication stuff. I used to go to the critical mass rides, all that sort of stuff, Danish Dynamo
Mm.
rides. Saw cargo bikes around, 10 years ago, thought they looked pretty cool. Ended up living in Hastings on the South Coast, had a child, got stuck in the house a bit, got encouraged by my wife to go to, she saw a flyer for a community bike workshop, went to that. That was another 8 years of my life. Suddenly I got really involved with that, ended up spending a lot of time doing that. Recycling bikes, building bikes, working in bike shops, doing other stuff alongside everything else I did. Fast forward to having a second child. We had to sell a van because we owned a van, didn't own a car. Vans only have 3 seats. We now had 2 children, 4 humans. Sold the van, had money, bought a cargo bike. Changed my life completely. They're amazing. E-cargo bike. Rode it back from London with my daughter sitting on the front. Was absolutely staggered. I've been riding bikes all my life. This thing is incredible. I can take my daughter. I can stop for a cake. We can stop for 2
Yeah.
cakes. We can carry all the cake.
You can
I'm
shop.
I'm cycling over the North Downs on all the bridleways and tracks I know, and I've got a 5-year-old sitting on the front. I've got camping gear and cakes, and it's like, wow, this thing's amazing. And from that point on, I was like, I want to do something with these. So that was 6-7 years ago. I decided I want to make them. So as you do when you find a thing you like, and that bike was a Risa Muller.
Right,
That
right.
was a load 60, one of 5 in the country at the time, I
Wow.
understood. I think that's true. I
What
bought
what
it at
year
my
was
bed.
that?
2017, 18.
Right, okay. Wow,
Uh,
wow, that's
that,
amazing.
that model, yeah. There really weren't many Reese Millers around then.
No.
Um, and yeah, the sort of, yeah. And it was amazing bike. It was brilliant. And that, yeah, and I then started trying to make stuff. I welded old bikes together. I got taught how to weld by a bloke who built airplanes
Oh, wow.
because I figured if they stay in the air, then I can probably stay on wheels maybe. And just
Yeah,
sort of
stay classy high.
gradually moved it forward. Lucky enough to have the opportunity to try and do that because I just finished a job and kind of timing worked out and I had time and opportunity. And then COVID happened, um, and which is when I met you over the phone because you phoned me up because we were running a cargo bike delivery service in the town we lived in. And well, yeah, just prototyping, building during COVID, having my little crappy, very expensive in the south of England workshop to try and make stuff. Um, yeah, and that's sort of taken me to where I am now, where I make bikes. I try and sell the bikes. Have my own little company making e-cargo bikes. I've sold some, made lots. I think they're okay.
Yeah.
And that's probably took too long.
I think that
That was
was
lots
actually
of me
very good. That
talking.
was
Um,
very
but
concise. You've gone from like the very beginning all the way up to
well, I'm
now.
just trying to. I'm just trying to. You don't often do it, but I try to think there is a thread of like bikes.
Yeah.
Bikes are great. That's sort of it. Bikes are great.
Yeah.
Bikes are empowering. Whether you are a 5-year-old me on a red tricycle trying to ride around the farmers' fields where you live, whether you're like, I'll tell you one other thing.
Yeah.
This is my origin myth with the cargo bike stuff. So I told you that we rode from London. We bought the bike all the way down to Hastings. So it's not a million, it's not like a massive journey, but it's like an overnight camp. And we went obviously really quiet roads and tracks and stuff. And we camped near a place called Tunbridge Wells. A very, very genteel, very nice,
I
expensive
know it.
town.
Royal Tunbridge Wells.
Sorry, yeah, had to have that there. Anyway, but and there was only camps. It was campsite was about halfway. And we got the campsite, set everything up. I had my 5-year-old with me, and I've got to go and find some food. We're going to go and get dinner, and there's a pub just up the road. So we jump back on the bike, which is now unloaded of all the camping stuff and everything we carried with us, various teddies and things, and we ride up to the pub. And it's a smart pub. It's a very, very Sussex gastro sort of pub. And there's like in the
Yeah.
car park, there's like big 4x4s, shiny German cars, all this sort of stuff. So I didn't have a lock for the bike, so I just left it right by the front door steps where we could kind of see it, and we're like, so it's kind of it's like on display. And I sit near the front door with my daughter, we get some food and stuff. It's cool. She's she's excited to be going out. And everyone who comes into that pub comments on the bike because they've never seen anything like it. And the thing that struck me, really, really hit me, is every woman who came in, and they were mainly old, wealthy, sort of, I'm guessing 60 years old plus women, that's amazing. They all said it. That's amazing. I wish one of those had been around when I had my children. And they'd all talk to my daughter saying, "Oh, do you like going in it?" But they're like, that. It really struck me that these people aren't people you'd expect them to go, "That's a bike." If I'd parked out there like a gravel bike or a mountain bike or something else, everyone's going to go, "Oh, cyclist."
Yeah.
Ugh. That's going to. But because it was just, I think there's something about that it was really like, oh yeah. These things are transformative, and these people, despite the fact they're very different to me and they're like life experience is pretty very different to mine, they can see what this thing enables you to do with your child. Like that was really
Yeah.
cool. Like that was really, really like enlightening, I think. So anyway,
No, it's
that's
amazing. Yeah, and I guess I thought, well, maybe I'll. Yeah, 'cause it's interesting actually hearing you talk about your route to this because mine is so different
cool.
and maybe a bit more frenetic. I don't know as well, but I didn't. I It's one of those weird things for me where I don't think I probably have always been like sort of embedded in the idea that like bikes are best and that's the way to get around. And like I did, I come from a family. We live from Essex. And we were, we learned to ride bikes very early on. Like I had a bike with stabilizers, and I remember I was only like 4 or 5 when I sort of learned to, ride a big bike without stabilizers. A bike that was too big. I have 2 older brothers, so everything I had was
Okay,
like
yeah,
hand downs. So, which is good in one sense because it gets you, I got used to being able to get on a bike that was far too big for me when I was too little. And so the thing of like almost like getting on a penny farthing, where you like have to like get yourself up on it, and then
yeah.
once you're on it,
You've got to be going, really.
yeah. You got to be moving, and then when you basically stop
Yeah.
by kind of falling to one side, landing on your feet, if you manage to get the hang of it. but yeah, so I had like all that in my upbringing. But yeah, we were, we didn't grow. It was sorry, we didn't grow up in the countryside, but in sort of we were townies basically. So it was definitely one of those things where, as you got into sort of being a teenager, like owning a car was like the thing that you wanted. Like it was because
Mm.
that then gave you the freedom. But having said that, there's definitely plenty of like I carried on riding bikes the whole time as a kid, and we used to go. There were some really great sort of BMX track places and stuff where we would go and ride, and I did some of what you said. Like I had a friend who lived, I don't know what about in a sort of couple of towns along maybe a 6 mile 5 mile ride, which is not really far, but the most direct route was on the A12, which is a dual carriageway, so you had to take like the back routes, and
Yeah.
we used to go on these quite big, like just big bike rides on the weekends and stuff. So I did kind of get into that thing, but I suppose I never the idea of using a bike for transportation, like in and of itself, was something that I think I didn't really get until not that long ago, really. So then, to pass my driving test as well, similar to you, like I wasn't only a few months on from being 17, got a car. I didn't mainly use it to move bikes around, unfortunately. And it kind of, skipping on a bit from there to being kind of an adult. I did take a bike to uni. I had a bike at uni but then I had a car as well. I was one of those students that all the local residents hate because they create all the parking problems and everything else. Um, and because I think as well when you've got a car at uni, it was like you can help move other people around. So that was like it's kind of one of those things as a status thing. And then for me, kind of getting back into biking properly, I moved up to the Lake District in 2012, mainly because I'd got we were my girlfriend at the time and myself. We were both like working in and living in London, but um didn't need to be there. Like we both basically had remote jobs working from
Yeah.
home. So it was like, seemed ridiculous to be somewhere so expensive. And yeah, it was getting up to the mountains. And I'd always had this thing as a kid, like they called a bike a mountain bike. Like that was the bike that was what everyone had back then. But like, I never really saw mountain biking. I was like, well, this is like a mountain bike, but I live in, it's just
Yeah.
kind of hilly in Essex. It's not, where's a mountain? I want to see like mountain biking. And discovering some of the trail centers there, like that, it just really spoke to my inner child of like, I think something I'd always wanted to do that just didn't really exist when I was a kid. And even looking like this is like early 90s, the mountain biking of that era looks tough. Like compared to what it looks, in terms of like the bikes were not really,
No, I mean, I was doing that. I when I was like between the ages of 12 and 15, I saved up and bought Marin mountain bikes.
oh, yes.
And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would ride cross country mountain bike. I'd do 70, 80 miles on a weekend on a Saturday because
Oh
I'd
my
ride to the
goodness.
South Downs. I'd do all of the South Downs bits that I knew and loved on
Yeah.
this like rigid. And yeah, I was like, it was, yeah, kind of, it completely hooked me. Um,
Yeah.
but then, basically my kind of sporting career got distracted by music and girls, basically. So kind of bikes sort of became a like support act to that rather than like, trying to ride all the time, everything.
Yeah.
But mountain biking was always in the background for things I've done because it's fun. And but I think what you just said is interesting because it's sort of, that's what cycling's become in the UK compared to most normal European countries where it's like a bike is a form of transport, it's a thing for getting stuff around, or it can be sporting vehicles. In the UK, it's leisure and sporting. That's
Yeah.
essentially what we do. That's what bikes are for. They're entertainment sort of things. They're
Yeah.
fun. And that's all true and great. And I love that. I do a lot of that. But it's not why they're magical, in my view, really now.
I,
Like,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
completely agree. Yeah, and that's I think and that spark really. Yeah, so obviously I got a quite decent mountain bike for I don't know over a decade ago now, and started getting into mountain biking. And I think weirdly enough that was probably the catalyst still that like drew me back in because I think realizing how amazing the technology was, like how things had moved on. It was the first time I'd ever had a bike that had like hydraulic disc brakes and like
yeah.
and proper like suspension, like amazing suspension. Like I remember, my brother got the Rally Activator, which had like the, the suspension fork, the first one I think we had ever seen, and then my other brother got the Activator too, which had the rear suspension. but both of they're like little shock absorber things. You know, they're
Yeah, yeah,
nothing.
yeah.
It-
Yeah, I remember my friend Edward Thomas had the same thing, like at age 12 or so, and
oh,
yeah, I
maybe,
remember thinking at the time that that's very heavy.
yeah,
That's not that's a thing that didn't really help. But I mean, the tech. Again, it's sort of frustrating. It frustrates me now. The money and tech that's in mountain bike technology, which are wonderful toys, sort of for mainly rich older guys in the UK. It's amazing. Like these things are beautiful, wonderful expressions of joy.
yeah.
Mountain bikes are, but there's such a bigger picture that in the UK we don't see about
No,
around bikes in general. I
yeah.
think.
Ma- Marrying that then to like actual sort of utility and function and yeah. So then to skip forward, like I think my sort of my next bike from that was a Brompton, which I got the electric Brompton actually because it was for me it was all about like a vehicle. Like that was the first time I think I'd been thinking about it because I knew in fact, yeah, the thing that got me onto that was that I had tried through sort of my various green interests that I have sort of outside of this particular um interest, you know, in terms of like cars and everything. Because I think actually we'll come to this in at another point, but like I think a lot of the green political movement, even in the UK, it's kind of started to really break my heart because I'm part of that. But like how this part of what we're talking about and what you've been saying still doesn't figure, even with those types of people. Like it's amazing actually how this car-centric mentality and this idea that bikes are just for fun, um, it's so
Yeah,
deep that the
yeah.
very people that you think would just completely get it don't get it. Yeah.
No, bikes aren't serious.
No.
Bicycles are not a serious thing in the UK, and it's weird. It's kind of weird, and I think
Yeah.
what's an interesting is kind of looking at the thing that I've tried to think about over time is like, how has that evolved? Because obviously we're now both involved in different ways in bicycle retail
Mm.
selling in the UK. And it's interesting looking at all the media and the infrastructure and the distributors and all the parts of what make up a retail segment, a resale industry in the country. And it is so focused around bikes for fun. And I use the word fun with love. Like fun is amazing. We should all have more fun. Bikes can be amazingly fun. But it doesn't help with it being a serious method of getting people around when
No.
essentially it's all about gains. Can you go faster, or can you be more extreme down the hill in mountain bike context, or is it like a leisure thing? Oh, you're going to go for a gentle ride along a towpath with your family. Like neither of those things are sort of tick the magic box that we're trying to solve as a country, hopefully around inactivity, around climate and carbon and air quality and congestion in towns and all this sort of stuff. So it's the industry is entirely set up for this sort of um, y- basically bikes as leisure, bikes as fun, bikes as sporting goods.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it came from the US. Obviously, that you mentioned a mountain bike. The mountain bike saved the bike industry. I think that's the title of there's a book, The Mountain Bike Saved the Bike Industry's Butt or something.
I'm
It's an
familiar.
American
Yeah.
thing, yeah. Because it did,
Yeah.
because obviously there was
The
bike sales
clunkers.
in the US. Yeah, there was the blip of uh, the OPEC oil crisis in the late 70s and into the 80s. And then bikes obviously were nothing again because oil was cheap, gasoline was cheap, so bikes were not important. And so, yeah, the bike industry, thankfully, some kind of Californian dudes in ripped jeans and beards invented the mountain bike, and suddenly there's a whole new sector to sell. And
Yeah.
that was great because I think if that hadn't happened, because God knows, maybe the bike would have just become like a tiny, tiny, tiny niche in like the world's transport. I suppose
Well,
maybe.
yeah, and I guess to come to something, one of the few areas I find of sort of mild optimism in the UK
God, do
sort
share.
of market. Say
I
again, sorry.
need it. Do share it. I need optimism at the
Well,
moment.
it may not cheer you up much at all. No, but where I kind of got to in my because my story I can go down many rabbit holes and I will try and resist doing so. But yeah, like 2019 I think was when I got my Brompton, and the Brompton I think is actually one symbol of a bike that, in large part, like it's far from perfect, but like it's a British invention. It isn't about fun or sports.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not
No,
saying
it's
it's not
just great.
fun, but it is actually a very functional bike that is largely ridden by people for a very functional purpose. And
Yeah.
like, I appreciate some of the, so I guess some things that some critics would say about it in terms of its broader impact is that like around London, for example, it's people will often use it when they could still use the tube or sort of other ways of getting around. So it's not how many car miles Bromptons take off the road. I don't know for sure, but like yeah, it's a pretty good success story in the sense that, and don't get me wrong, I know it's not all roses, but and yeah, for me, like it was the as I said, I was looking at sort of trying to get around car free, and I was traveling quite a lot. So it's not just about like how do I do my weekly shopping and that kind of thing that you hear from people, but like how do I extend the public transport network of the UK and then of other places too. So, and having like the electric Brompton was amazing because it basically opens up pretty much the whole of the UK
Yeah,
to
yeah.
you to
Well,
relatively easily travel to. Like you can, yeah,
Brompton is an amazing success story because our
yeah,
trains are crap.
yeah.
Yeah, that's it. That's basically
No, exactly.
I mean, it's a brilliant thing. And if you do want a bike that can hide under a desk, I mean, there are obviously there are competitor products now and everything.
I now sell a better one, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But if we had proper trains where you could take like real bikes, and
yeah,
I use that with tongue in cheek, like they're great. It's a fantastic company, brilliant product.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
But
and
that's why they've done so well. And then it became this fashion icon, and obviously the
yeah.
sales around the world, and in New York, in Tokyo, all that stuff is really interesting. But
Yeah, and I didn't mean to make this into an advert for them because it's not like yeah, it probably sounds a bit like that. And I've actually got some negative things to say as well. But I suppose yeah, it's oh, what was I going to say? Oh, I was going to yes, you talked about how it's because our trains are crap, but
yeah,
I actually had a lot of success as well. Like I enjoyed it a lot taking it around Europe. So like taking it on the Eurostar. And then it allows you, because I've got to say, actually, like even the TGV, it's not brilliant for taking
uh,
bikes on.
no,
And in fact, the Eurostar, which is
yeah,
operated by the French, also a
yeah, it's
pain in the
awful.
bum.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And in fact, yeah, I discovered the hard way. Even if you've got a Brompton, you have to have it like, or for any folding bike, you have to have it like in a bag just to take it on. But yeah, I had also traveled before on the Eurostar with regular sized bikes where you have to like book them in, get there an hour
yeah,
early, they go into the
yeah,
cargo
yeah.
thing. It's a whole nightmare. So it's not as though it's all great on the continent either, but I think as well what we have seen certainly since the pandemic is that the it's getting a lot better, and I think this is where I was talking to a friend of mine the other day. It feels like coming up, sort of getting nearly up to speed with you when I first spoke to you and how I kind of then got into the cargo bikes. That sort of bounce back better thing. I feel in this country we've bounced back worse. Like it's
I don't know where we've bounced to. It's pretty weird. But yeah, we haven't stopped bouncing either. But I agree with that
no,
totally. I think you can see, in particular, France, Paris, the infrastructure changes that happens kind
it's
of
phenomenal.
directly attributable to COVID. And although I can't make a comparison with Hastings and St Leonard's, where I was living at the time, and Southeast England and Paris, the most famous city in the world. But basically, obviously, every local authority, every sort of city was like going, oh, what can we do? How can we encourage people to walk about, but safe
Mm.
distancing, all this sort of stuff? How can we do this? And there was loads of money in the UK. Local authorities were basically told, you can do stuff. You don't have to worry about traffic regulation orders. You can just close roads. You can make pavements wider, all this sort of stuff. And some places in the UK did that. And it pretty much, as soon as the end of returning to normality kind of happened, lots of that infrastructure got taken away pretty damn rapidly. I think there were court cases, wasn't there? I think
Yeah,
Cycling UK
there's still
took
some going on. I
Shoreham,
think,
was
aren't
it
there?
East Sussex?
Yeah,
But yeah, in Hastings, like nothing happened. You know,
yeah,
they did essentially nothing to kind of, and I think it's such a sort of cultural difference between, yeah, just, and this isn't just talking about the bikes as well. This is people being able to walk. I
yeah,
remember arguing with a counsellor. I just looked out my window and just did a little drawing of, so we were stuck in the flat because it was COVID times. And I just like took a photo of the window, measured, this is the kind of nerd I am, like the amount of pavement space, the amount of road space, that's taken up by parked cars on both sides of the road. And the road is really big, this particular road in question. And just said, look, you can see this. Like, why can't we just have a bit more space to allow people to walk about? Because we want people to walk about, but we've all got to be 3 meters apart or whatever we're doing. And it just none of it landed in places like
Right.
that in the UK. And it's fascinating to see places where it has and how things have changed in those European places. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't have
Uh,
a global knowledge, but I do know a bit about what went on in Europe and how it's progressed from then.
yeah, and what you were saying, like I was sort of as the pandemic was going on, I'd been sort of half living in France a bit, and what I think is interesting is, yeah, it's very easy to look at Paris and look at how much things have changed, but I can also say that like that's happened everywhere. Like it's, there's a little not that small. There's a town called Annemasse right near the border with Geneva on the French side, and the complete transformation of Annemasse, like there was just like a post-pandemic complete rebuilding of like all the roads to have segregated cycleways. It was just incredible. Like, and I've seen that in just so many other French towns and cities. Like
Yeah.
it's not just this big thing in Paris with Anne Hidalgo. Like I appreciate there's a lot's going on there, but no, you're right. But then there's, yeah, I guess it comes to the thing I think you just said. It is one of the most frustrating elements of this, and which we'll go into in more detail, I think, in sort of future episodes, is this, well, the word for it, as we now know, and I didn't know for a long time, was motonormativity.
Yep.
And for anyone who doesn't know, we'll put a definition in. I might edit that in because I don't want to try and do that on the fly. But
Oh,
what
thanks.
it basically
In
is,
Walker's just published something. I saw a post
oh,
today
has he?
from Rob, the guy who runs Really Useful Bikes
Oh,
down in
yes, yeah.
Bristol. He posted a link on Instagram to something that Ian Walker has published around that, I believe. So it might be a good time to kind of read
Yes.
his authentic original definition of it all.
We can put that in the show notes, yeah. But I
Yeah.
guess the thing that made me think of it immediately as you said it is that point of people not even seeing what they've sacrificed for cars. And you just see that like all day for someone. Well, once the scales fall from your eyes, you can't help but see it absolutely everywhere, and it's almost
Mm.
annoying. It becomes,
Well,
well,
it's
it
a
is.
curse.
It's not almost annoying. Yeah, it's
It's a curse.
absolutely
You know,
infuriating in that sense.
I
That
mean, that's my poor my wife Rosie and my children who hear me rant about this stuff all the time. I was this morning. I live now. I've moved. My business is now run in southwest Scotland. I moved to Scotland at the tail end of the pandemic, mainly in order to be able to afford to have somewhere with a barn, so I could work on what I do. So I've got a big shed, and I build e-cargo bikes in the big shed.
yeah,
And I live in rural southwest Scotland, because it's really nice, primarily, but also because property is accessible and affordable, so it made it a viable thing to try and do. So the nearest town to me is a place called Dumfries, which is a nice wee town, about 38,000 people, I think, something like that, around 30,000 something. A weird thing that happened there following the pandemic, and a lot of restrictions in Scotland were much tougher in terms of the constraints on businesses, schools, and people's movements were stricter in Scotland during those years, or that year and a half. It seems that basically like all traffic regulations are just given up on, and lots of things like the pedestrianised area of the town and stuff which is notionally like between in during 9 to 5 you shouldn't take a vehicle in. All this stuff is now
yeah.
routinely ignored, and the
This is
local
my daily
authority,
life.
yeah, the local kind of authority basically sort of have said with legitimate reasons they can have budget to enforce this sort of stuff. So we just kind of get this gradual increasing and encroachment of vehicles into everything. So I was walking, there's like double yellow lines. Double yellow lines are sort of standard joke in the UK. Like you do not park on a double yellow line. Like that was culturally, like that's a thing. It's always been a thing. Like
Yeah,
it's just not anymore. And
no,
there's no enforcement of that. So essentially you got small little streets in a town where basically people just leave vehicles all day long. Uh, and it's incremental, but it seemed, because you're building on something that's already bad, it does seem so crippling once you kind of have a bee in your bonnet about it, and you kind of think this would be so much nicer if we weren't doing this. This
yeah,
town would be nicer. I wouldn't be worried about my children being run over by a truck in the middle of
yeah.
the town centre.
And I think
And
that,
it's just very hard to see. We've let it slide in this direction to such a degree now that
yeah,
yeah, it's puzzling. Really, really
and
puzzling.
I think psychologically, especially for people like you and I, the thing that is so difficult to get to kind of swallow around this is that people are like they don't. it's almost just treated like a fact of life that like cars are really dangerous. They're just this like naturally occurring thing
A
that are
force of
that
nature, yeah.
yeah, they're everywhere. They're like
Yeah.
everything's awful. The first thing you teach children is like be really careful around the road. Again, there's almost like a victim blaming immediately of just like if you do get hit, it's your fault. You know, you've got to be really careful. And yet, amidst all of that noise and chaos, a person whistles past on a bike, and that's what gets our hackles up. Like that's where people then get annoyed, and it's
Yeah.
like and it's like oh my god, that did you see that bike just run a red light like in front of all the sort of cars
Yeah.
doing God knows what else, and it's
Yeah,
like what
we're so
why
it's cultural, yeah, and obviously you and I nerds in this world of bikes, like we know the statistics, you know the facts around the energy contained in a human on a bike versus the energy of a small car, and the kind of consequences of that hitting a human is a scale factor of difference. But bikes cause this kerfuffle in the UK that is entirely disproportionate to the effect they will have, and has become like a media trope to use, and
yeah
it's the whole thing is bundled up together. And I think that's sort of why, if we're going with this sort of podcast idea, if we can try and unpick that, try and understand that, because I can't. I've grown up. I've travelled abroad a bit. I've worked abroad a little bit, but mainly I've lived on this benighted island all my life, and I don't get it. I don't get
yeah
why we're so addicted to cars. Why any what I think is really interesting now is any sort of like attempt by a local authority to restrict or reduce car use or promote, even just promote alternative forms of getting about, immediately causes such the word over here would be a stooshy, where you basically, it's a powder keg of opinion gets lit. It seems from a certain demographic, but certainly they're very vocal, and that
yeah
gets mirrored and amplified in the media we have. So I'm sure, I mean, this is proved regularly by cycling campaigning organisations. When you do opinion surveys, most people would actually quite like to ride a bike more, have more safe access to it, especially women.
yeah
Um, like people would like this infrastructure, and they would like safer routes, and they would like reduced speeds from motor vehicles and other stuff. But that seems to be the reality from what I understand from opinion surveys. But the observable reality of the world, the towns and places we live in, is not that. That stuff isn't happening, or it's certainly not happening at any sort of speed.
yeah
And I thought
and
it would. I genuinely thought it would. I thought 5 years ago, like looking at what's happening here, I can see that, okay, we're behind, but it will, we will progress. And
yeah
when you're looking at sales numbers, sales of bikes in the UK has diminished year on year. Sales of e-bikes have diminished year on year. Cargo bikes have fallen off a cliff, um, which is my own personal problem.
and mine
Yeah, yeah. And car numbers are pretty much increasing exponentially.
drive-through
Uh,
numbers at the
yeah,
highest peak
yeah,
drive-through is where we're at now.
right. Yeah. Oh
Yeah,
Christ. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're out Americaning, the Americans with vehicle use, I
and
in a
again you see
place where
just
you can walk most places where people
yeah
live. It's
well,
not
and this is
Arkansas.
the crazy part. Like I was reading a horrible thing about the drive-through nature and like how people go to drive-throughs. I mean, I don't mean to. It's not. I don't like to get into sort of individual judgment, but the sort of post-pandemic antisocial element of us is that people drive to a drive-through, get their thing. Like the queues can be really long now at these. I don't know if you've seen some of these. Like there's a McDonald's at North of Lancaster where I live, and like massive queue, and then park up in the car park, and then sit and eat the food in the car park, and then leave, and like they could just get out the car and go in. And like, and there was a thing I was reading was saying that I think McDonald's are even studying it, being like, it would have been quicker for the family to
To
get
go
out,
eat it.
sit inside, but they don't want to. We don't want to see each other. We don't want to see people. We don't. It's this kind of extrinsic,
Well,
stay in the car, don't
there's a.
interface with anyone.
I
Yeah,
think we mentioned. I think it's Blind Boy podcast before we were recording, and I think it's him. I think I was listening to something recently where he's talking about cars are the original social media. Cars the original Twitter, because in a car, your consequences of your actions are insulated from you, exactly
yeah,
as a social media account. You can, the way your car is an extension of your personality. in the same way as a social media account.
Yeah, you can be a
Making
troll, can't you, in a car?
you can, but you have you being part of the observable society and social fabric and world you're in seems to also be removed. So he was talking about, I'm fairly sure it was him, was talking like, just he could sit in the car, sitting in the middle of town, just picking his nose, like,
Yeah,
properly doing that while singing along to something on the radio. And you wouldn't do that if you were sitting on a park bench just there. This bubble that they provide, this insulation from the real world, is there's so many parallels with how we behave online. It's really
yeah.
interesting. I thought it was a really good comparison to make.
It's
Um,
amazing, isn't it? It's in fact, so well, I'll finish my story to get to where I
yeah,
am,
yeah, yeah. Sorry,
and then
we've
it's all right because I want to come to. I mean, to come to what you just said, I have a shop now on a high street in Lancaster, and I saw exactly, literally what you were saying. I mean, we're out in the really busy one-way system, and I see elements of what you said, but I saw a really extreme example of that only the other day of a man sat in traffic, at a standstill, singing at the top of his lungs, picking his nose, and the idea that you would like walk along that same street doing that, you obviously wouldn't, but sat there with the window open in your car doing it, it's fine, and yeah, it's a mad thing. But I was going to say, so I got to meet you, Tim, because I have a little Brompton. Um, we'd obviously gone through. I bought it just before the pandemic, which was then kind of ironic because it didn't get quite the use I'd hoped for it initially. But yeah, coming out, I think as things were loosening up after the lockdowns, I'm trying to remember exactly how the cargo bikes came onto my radar because I actually knew of a lady like the thing I asked you right at the very beginning, I think, of the podcast was like, what was your awakening? And I actually didn't get to my moment of awakening about cars, and I guess this whole topic around Carspiracy was this lady in Aberdeen that I used to work with. We worked at a company where everyone worked remotely, and so she had a blog, and she had non-electric cargo bikes, was really into them, and she wasn't even like she wasn't a particularly kind of hippie type of person or particularly green. Like she was Australian living in Aberdeen. I think she still lives in Aberdeen, and she's still a very active campaigner on the issue of cycling, and just her like angle was just on a very logical one of like the most efficient way for me to live my life and get around is to have one of these bikes that she had two young kids. I could chuck them in the front. I think it was a three-wheeler one, her first one. I
okay.
mean, she's a complete cargo bike aficionado, and she's not into the electric ones. She thinks that's cheating. The proper ones. But relatively flat where she is, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. As long as no hills, you're
But
fine.
and also she was, she rode them all the time, so she was pretty fit. But she made this point in one of her blog posts, and it was definitely the moment of like, oh, because I wasn't like massively pro car, but she just made this point. It will seem quite mundane to some people, but she said, why don't cars have to stop? Why don't drivers have to stop their cars and press a button and wait for the pedestrians to stop? Why do I have to stop my bike or whatever and press the button and wait?
Yeah, yeah.
And I know some people will be like, well, some people who are very pro car will be like, well, they're stupid. Of course you wouldn't do that. But it, it just creates that immediate thing of, yeah, like, why is the hierarchy? Like, even though I think at the time I read it, I didn't agree. I was like, well, it wouldn't work. But I was like, but I couldn't logically argue as to why like motorists get this priority. And obviously that was just then the beginning of this waterfall of like, yeah, like there's all these little things, and like her doing her thing, which allegedly like is what the government like want more people to do. Seeing how someone like her was just basically punished at like every turn to try to do the right thing,
Yeah,
and you were
it's
kind of
harder. It's harder to, if you want to
yeah,
go. I mean, we've got great engineering departments in all like local authorities, making sure that your vehicle route to the supermarket they've planned on the outside of town is safe and designed. So you've got sight lines on corners, and you've got
yeah,
roundabouts that are safe and junctions that are staggered and all this other stuff. And then you're like, well, you want to ride a bike to go to Aldi? Well, can you
good
climb
luck.
steps? Can you climb steps with it on your back? Can you make your way through a ditch? And
Yeah,
then yeah, it's the cultural hierarchy. I don't know if that's the right word. I'm not eloquent enough around the sort of sociology terms for all this sort of stuff, but it is mad, and it's so entrenched. But it's not that long. Like when you look back to like sort of 40s and 50s and photos of that time, like so the town south of you, Barrow, when Barrow was like a huge industrial town, everyone cycled to work. A mate of
yeah.
mine up here, his dad's from Barrow. He was
K
talking about it.
shoes.
It's like,
in Kendal.
yeah,
I remember seeing things about that. Yeah, all
yeah,
cycling to work. It was
because it was the sensible economic way to do it, and cars were too
yeah.
expensive. So, but
And that view as well, that like what I think is really interesting if you look at, and we'll, yeah, this will be a deeper topic for us as we move on with this, but cars, like motorists and their cars, were very much seen as these sort of guests in the city. Like, you are here, like we give you permission, like subject, it providing you behave yourself, if you drive through really carefully and really slowly, we'll let you. Because obviously the streets back then, it was all just people hanging out in the streets. And there's obviously a whole thing you can go into with, I think, the American car industry that created the whole notion of like jaywalking as a
yeah,
crime. And
yeah, yeah.
as things gradually shifted the other way, but it didn't start that way, and old vehicles you see in towns are going so slowly and they're just, gradually moving their way through around all the people being really careful.
But yes,
And
I
then
mean,
this, yeah,
this,
sorry, go
yeah,
on.
like obviously Carlton Reid's book. Have you read that?
I actually
Uh,
haven't read that. That is
it's
probably
it's long.
a
It's
must read. Yeah.
great. I mean, he's amazing.
I
I
know
think
Carlton Reid, yeah.
I've never met him, but it's a brilliant thing.
Sorry, I'm
And
not messing by that. I said I know
all
of
right,
him, but yes.
oh, okay. So it's just in case. But that book talks about that in such depth. You know, the way that obviously the book's called "But the Roads Were Not Built for Cars." And when you
Yeah.
look at like, I mean, obviously the UK, we're an old culture, an old set of countries, an old set of peoples, whatever you want to call it. And we've been building towns and stuff for a damn long time, but we've only had cars in number for the last 60 years, 70 years or so.
Yeah.
And we've just managed to screw up our towns so significantly
Yeah. Just,
because, I mean, yeah, Lancaster's a brilliant example. Most
oh,
places I've ever been and lived. So and it just but it's weird. Why have we allowed this to happen? And
and
the
people don't see
perceived
it.
convenience of vehicles in towns, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, so I guess to bring to how
Yeah,
we
sorry.
met, and no,
Yes.
it's fine. I didn't mean to do it this way, but I kind of just wanted to close the loop on it because it's how I then got to talk to you. Yeah, so I knew of this lady. I yeah, I saw what cargo bikes were doing. I think one thing that probably really kind of came across my radar was Pedal Me in London. And again, not to try and give someone free publicity, but they Pedal Me, for anyone who doesn't know, which is probably most people, they're a cargo bike delivery company in London. And I think the one really unique thing about what they do, because that's becoming not very, like, that's not unique at all now, because lots of, even like DHL are using cargo bikes in London. But they were one of the early ones, and their model was based around having bikes that can carry people or cargo, and you can book either through a kind of a hailing app. Um, and obviously they got going. I think 2017. I know you know a bit about them, but they was it?
Yeah, it's around then, I think. I mean, it's
Yeah,
Ben Knowles started it. Who's
yeah.
they've been through peaks and troughs since,
Yes, they
but
as we know,
yeah,
it's
they sent. I think the I don't know if they're still doing the
the
passenger
person
model
thing.
at all. I'm not sure, to be honest.
Well, I guess yeah.
Um,
So just for the sake of, without getting too deep on them at the moment, but the obviously for people listening to this during the lockdowns, the idea of a form of transport where you are outside the whole time and you're not having to share, and for vulnerable people going to hospital appointments and everything, and they're based in London, so there's plenty of that going on. They had a massive boom during the pandemic and got a lot of attention. Jeremy Vine did a bit about them, and they were on BBC stuff. They got featured on BBC News because they were this incredible form of transport. You hail a bike, it pulls up. It's a cargo bike, so like with a long front bay that you can, for people who've not seen them, you can get two passengers in the front of these bikes, two adult passengers. And I think that was one of the things that certainly got me thinking. And I, at the time, was still doing partly my work, online and remote, but I wanted to try and set something up in Lancaster. And you were running a cargo bike delivery business in Hastings, and
yeah,
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 and that
yeah, yeah.
that was how. So
So yeah,
I gave you a
you
call,
phoned me
and
up and
then
asked if you could call it Lancaster Cargo Co. because we've
yeah, indeed, offer your,
and you expect insurance, which was still hard, to be
which
honest.
is remains
Yeah,
difficult. And
yeah.
I got my first cargo bike. I heard about how you were building them, and you told me about your one that you'd ridden back from London. And but yeah, so just to bring it right to the end is that I got my cargo bike from a sort of recommendation from you. Learned a few things about things that weren't optimal about the one I bought. Ended up getting myself a Reese and Muller, and I was doing a bit of delivery stuff. I got a little business thing going, but then this really it was actually kind of getting one in that sense that then made me think, oh, I don't need a car. at all, really. And I don't have any kids. So I never had that element anyway. But I think I won't go to right now. I'm a bit of a recovering petrol head, really. So I liked cars, but realizing I think the complete futility of doing so many of the things, especially in a city like Lancaster by car, realizing how quick everything was by bike. And yeah, so I then wanted a Riese Muller similar to I got the Load 75 was
Yep.
my bike, and I suspect there were a lot more than four of them when I got mine. Although there is still not nowhere near enough. Anyway,
Yeah, in
and it
the
was like
UK, yeah.
through owning one of those, I discovered that like there's no bike shops aren't very they're not really well equipped to help people with those kinds of bikes, and you get stopped a lot, as you'll know as well from having had one. And I got to the mad idea that I should set up a cargo bike shop here. And luckily, I didn't set up just a cargo bike shop. I set up
Yeah,
an
yeah,
electric
hey,
bike shop
dodge that bullet, yeah.
into the what I've now discovered. So 2024 was my first full year of trading effectively, which was the worst year for the bicycle retail industry in the UK since the 1970s.
Yep.
Uh, so,
Yeah, yeah,
so
you did pick 'em, yeah,
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 the bubble
that's true.
had very much burst by the point I.
Yeah, it was a funny bubble, but I mean, there was a lot because yeah, it's on that sort of subject of like the trajectory into the business side of it. Because both of us run bike e-bike businesses. They're very
Yeah,
different, but we both do it. And when I was thinking of doing this, so back in 2017, 18, when I had the opportunity to buy the recent motorbike I built, I've been working in a friend's bike shop. I've been involved in lots of bike campaigning stuff and running the community bike project that we had in Hastings for quite a while. I was really interested in it all. I kind of knew distributors from bike brands and speak to them and go to trade events, that sort of stuff. And I remember saying to people, so I'm thinking about this, this is kind of what I'm thinking of doing, building e-cargo bikes here, talk about the brands in Europe, and like, oh, these guys do all this. I'm really excited by it. I'd like to try and do something here. And being sensible, I've always wanted to keep it, be a small thing and like be a kind of not bespoke, but a small hand-built project in the UK. And just chatting to people and they're going, yeah, that's good. We can see that coming. Like e-bikes are like in the post and we think that e-cargo bikes are on the way as well. This is the way the UK bike industry at that time, based on my sort of imperfect survey of the people I was talking to, sort of 7-8 years ago, were like, yeah, this is you're going the right way. It's probably not a bad idea. Yeah, and that unfortunately that prediction really like the kind of the little peak around COVID of everyone wanting a bike, and what that actually meant is everyone wanted a bike that cost £500.
yeah,
Like the bikes that you couldn't get were basically affordable bikes, and
mm,
the perception of affordable bike is an interesting thing, but because it's a lot less than affordable cars, I'll tell you that.
yeah.
So,
Tell me about it.
but the yeah, that bubble happened very quickly at the beginning of COVID, when basically riding a bike was one of the few fun things you could do. And since then, the UK e-bike businesses and UK cargo bike, tangentially cargo related businesses, it's all been very tough. It's not fun. And it's very contrasting again to what's going on with our brethren across the channel, not just in France, but in most of continental Europe. It's puzzling. And I'd really like to try and unpick a lot of this to try and get a better understanding, because I'm really frustrated by it. I try and run a small business making stuff in the UK. I import things from around the world. I try and assemble and build e-cargo bikes. People seem to like them. I enjoy that. But trying to sell them, trying to get people to understand what they are is harder now than it was 3 years ago. It's mad.
Yeah,
It's really mad. And I think you have the same thing in the shop. They're like, there's fewer people who know what e-bikes are
yeah.
even. It's
And despite like I guess, yeah, so the difficulty I've had with the shop, it actually like opening up went I think relatively well. And I knew that things like the cargo bikes were going to be they're obviously in a sense my passion, but I knew that I'd be more focusing on regular e-bikes as
yeah, yeah.
well. But yeah, I think what the difficult thing to just carry on that theme is that I basically had a better 2024 than I'm currently having in 2025. Like it's actually got that, not many businesses you open and then the second year's worse than the first.
It's
Um,
yeah, and like let's a bit of context. Lancaster's not a small place. Lancaster's 140,000 people, isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah, it's
It's
something like
got a
that.
big
Yep.
university.
City
It's kind of
district. Yep.
and you've got like the lakes, like above it and around it,
Yeah,
and
the
obviously like
broader region.
there's quite a lot of people, and it's it's not that you've tried to sort of set up an e-bike shop on like the island of Skye or something. It's you are surrounded by people and
Yeah,
varying incomes, and it's the sort of place that, yeah, again, the mirror of Europe, where you go into towns and there are e-bike shops,
loads of
quite
them.
a
Yeah,
few, because people buy these things. Um, I yeah, like where I'm based, the town nearest me, again, not nearly as big, but like the whole region, there's quite a lot of people. When I moved here, there were two e-bike shops. Well, one was a sort of more regular bike shop cafe, and the other one was a specific e-bike shop. And both of those have unfortunately gone now. Um, and it's really weird. Why are we so weird? What's going on that makes us so weird? Why can we not? I mean, and it's obvious. Like, everyone goes, "Oh, you can't be like Holland," you know. But like, well, mm, yeah, or it's flat in Holland and it rains too much here and there are hills.
yeah.
But then you go, well, Germany. Germany's got big hills and it rains a lot
Norway.
in quite a lot of Germany. Yeah, like,
Yeah,
and
it's
Ireland, I think it rains
yeah,
quite a lot in Ireland, and Ireland's e-bike sales are significantly greater than ours,
doing a
and
lot,
they're,
but yeah,
so
we love excuses.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There's always a reason to kind of why bikes aren't the answer.
Yeah,
And I
and I
think there's so
guess
many things where e-bikes answer those questions. Like,
yeah.
I'm,
I mean, this is a conversation. I mean, I think we'll wrap up relatively soon, but it's something I would like to go into more detail about. I've had these circular conversations with people where they throw excuse after excuse after excuse as to why they can't or we don't or whatever, and it's sad and maddening that often when you get to the end of it, they're just like, okay, I just don't want one, all right? Like, despite all of these things, I don't want to change. Like, I don't like change. I want to drive my car to the supermarket. I don't want to use one of your stupid bikes. And
yeah,
then
and
it's like, right,
I think again, you mentioned this earlier. I think it's really important not to. In the UK, we're really good about immediately breaking down to like individual responsibilities.
yes, yeah,
So when you look at the argument around littering, everyone's like, oh, people who litter are scum. They need to be kind of chased from these lands.
yeah.
And around where I live, a lot of the littering gets chucked out the windows of delivery vans. Um, and I think I find it irritating, unpleasant, and I wish I didn't do it. Um, I can understand why people who are delivering for any of them, to be honest, apart from like some of the better employers, of which there's only, I think, some of them. But essentially, you're treated like crap. Your
Mm,
time is measured down to the second. You're not making a great deal of money, and no one values you at any point in your kind of delivery chain. So why would you value the environment you're driving through when it's just essentially the hedges are just a problem for you because you can't see around the corner to go faster to make the delivery? So I kind of get it. Like, it's it's not, and the system that enables people to kind of feel so devalued is going to produce people who don't value the system they're in.
yeah.
And I think you can say the same about like how we treat transport and stuff like that. And you've kind of got to be weird. I'm weird. I fully admit it. I'm weird. I see cars. It's like, yeah, I see dead people. I see cars everywhere. I see the effects of cars where there aren't cars.
Yeah, yeah.
I see
I'm with
ghost
you on all this,
cars,
right?
and but
Killing me.
also I see the ghost of potential. I see like, wow, this,
Yeah.
and occasionally you get these wonderful moments. So I was delivering a bike, one of my bikes I've made and sold. Yay. And I was delivering it to where it's going, and I was just riding it through quite a nice bit of cycle infrastructure. There's a little path that goes through a wood, and I just stopped at a junction or something, and this guy pulls up next to me. He's actually walking. He's walking his dog. And
Right.
he's, oh, mate, what's that? What's that? And this is what you mentioned. If you're riding a weird electric bike, a cargo bike especially, you always have to factor in journey time because you're going to spend time talking about it. And as soon as you say you've made it, that's a whole nother,
Oh, I
especially
got
old men, they love to talk about that. But this guy was like, oh, yeah, that's my e-bike, isn't it? Yeah, it's e-bike. I got an e-bike recently, changed my life. And it's really interesting how many times. I mean, I live in rural Scotland. I I'm not in South London. I'm not seeing people like on every corner. There's
mm,
not millions of people around me. But it's amazing how often I'll have interactions with people because I'm riding a weird bike and they take an interest in it. And they go, oh, yeah, I got an e-bike. It tends to be older people.
yeah.
And they're like, it changed my life. A lot of people talk about health benefits. They're basically just like, complete evangelists for these
Yeah.
things. And they're just regular dudes. They're not they're not weird like me. They're just people who've gone, yeah, this thing's amazing. I can ride to the shopping. I go and see my grandkids. I do all this stuff. It's fantastic. And, and you've had no help to do that. There's no incentives, nothing else. A friend of mine just done exactly the same thing. She's a care worker. She managed to get through, managed to get cycle to work voucher, and she's got an e-bike, and she's completely blown away by it. Like
Yeah.
it's like transformative. For she doesn't drive, it's brilliant.
And these are like the star customers I get, in a sense, where like but they're the ones that you sell them a bike, I hear nothing for like a year. Um And then they'll come in and be like, okay, is my bike due for service? And I haven't been as good as I could be at reminding people when their services are due. That was the thing I'd intended to do when I got the shop going. But yeah, you're like, oh God, yeah, it's been over a year. Yeah, bring it in by all means. And obviously the bikes I'm selling are, they're good quality bikes, so they last a long time, and there's not normally much that needs doing within the first couple of years. But yeah, a few of these bikes have come in and I've put them into the diagnostics, and the person's done like 5,000 miles.
Yeah,
And it's like, do you have, whoa. And
yeah,
they're using it every day for everything, and they're just loving it. But in a frustrating sense, a lot of those kinds of customers, they're not necessarily on Instagram or the social media. They're not in the places where they're influencing other people. But the stories they tell you are incredible, and it's like, oh God, I need to do something with this, because it's communicating the joys that people have. And there have been some great. I mean, there was a story not so long ago. I think Henry Mance in the Financial Times wrote a thing about e-bikes, and just absolutely raving, and just, said,
yeah,
I've finally ridden one. And he talked about how being on an e-bike gave you that thrill of when you first ride a bike without stabilizers, that moment of feeling that like mechanical advantage of a basic bicycle, and that, oh my
yeah.
God, the speed suddenly picking up. And it recreates it for adults. You get on it, and that power it gives you,
Or the
and you're still
amplification.
pedaling.
Yeah, the word I always use to try and describe is amplification. Like it amplificate. And the thing is, like again, this guy who's talking about, so probably late 60s, early 70s, I'm guessing. We chatted for like 20 minutes about how wonderful his e-bike was, really, and I was just really enjoying him. And
Uh,
and yeah, just the fact that if lots of people talk about this, the idea that obviously cycling is a great health intervention,
yeah,
and you should have cycling prescription and like that sort of idea. If you take someone who's sort of whatever age, but like if they've not done any sort of physical activity, they haven't ridden a bike for like 25 years or something, you put them on a regular bike and get them to ride up a 10% incline. They're not going to do that again
no,
in a rush. It's horrible. It's really hard work. Like, and especially the steeper it gets, it's
yeah, yeah,
hard. Put them on an e-bike and they can use whatever level of assist they choose. They will do that, and they will do it again and again and again, because you get the joy of it without it smooths your path back into taking exercise in that way.
yeah,
They are magical. They are brilliant.
yeah.
And it is completely puzzling that which is, I guess, maybe a subject we should focus on to try and stop this being just rambling. Why do we not have any financial incentive, significant financial incentive for the purchase of e-bikes in the UK, when we have every other form of electric transport has either a really significant tax or a grant of blah, 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 blah. There's loads of stuff. There's a really good article, which I think I sent you. I'm going to play it
You
now.
did. We can pop it in the show notes. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a guy from Noel Flay Cass, who I've never met, is a research fellow at the University of Leeds. Basically, a really well
I don't
referenced
know.
article. Do you?
No, sorry, I don't
Okay.
know if you did send me this one, because
Yeah, I
I know
did. Yeah,
Noel.
yeah. I sent it. This was last week. I
Is
always
that
know
the
it
one
was a
on the
couple of weeks ago.
conversation?
Yes.
I
No,
didn't
well,
see it was written by Noel.
can we get him on this?
He lives in Lancaster.
I saw he's got a thing from University of Lancaster, but yeah,
Yeah,
University of Leeds is what he's
he works
attributed
at
to that.
Leeds, but yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
but there's a brilliant article because it actually, unlike me just ranting about this stuff, it's very well referenced. And yeah, I just think that again, like why are we doing this? Why did France choose to subsidize e-bike purchase over the last 5 years, and we just chose not to?
Yeah.
And I think there's lots of questions around that. Is it to do with like essentially cultural incumbency? Is it just inertia? Is it just, nah, we don't do that? Is it as simple as that? Is it motor vehicle or, motor vehicle lobbying? Is it the power of that? Is it the power of like the motoring organisations, like the AA and the RAC, if they have political parties, they'd be the biggest in the country, wouldn't they? Like,
Oh my
is it
goodness,
stuff like
yeah,
that?
it's yeah, yeah.
Is it our media? Is it just like the thought of the fact that if you're a party in power and you announce you're going to give a subsidy to allow like old people to buy e-bikes, is it going to be presented as some sort of mad sop to
Yeah.
eco loons in the Daily Mail? Is it? Why are we not doing this? It's
Well, the
weird.
good news is that I'm sure, in fact, I'm 99% certain we'll be able to get Noel on as a guest quite
Cool.
easily.
Yeah.
I was emailing him today, so I didn't realize. Yeah, this is amazing. I
Serendipity,
read that
you
article.
don't get that of AI.
I read that without even, didn't even clock that it was written by Noel.
Okay.
But yeah, if we'll maybe wrap things here, and because we've been going for quite a while, and
Yeah, we've
I
hit the
think
hour barrier. Feels like.
yes, yeah. And let's maybe see that from this moment we'll mute out anyway, so we can now just talk. But I'll maybe stop the recording actually, and then.
I know,
But
okay.
yeah,